we are now officially streaming the third Inner Child Peace Summit over to Facebook, and I had said I was going to do it to Instagram as well. So I'm just going to get that going and ultimately say that we are just going to flow with what comes, and we have done the preparatory work to bring a very special treat to you. So I apologize for reaching above you in that moment. Instagram is now live, so they can tune in too. And so we together are now here for the third Inner Child Peace Summit. So thank you to each of you, and also just to bring in the fact that it is a full moon and those energies are here. It's a great time for completions and new beginnings with the energies that are around us and the energies that we are creating right here where we are, together in community, where we have strength. And our inner child ultimately is like the soul. And if we can understand that the inner child is the soul aspect of ourselves, and that when we nurture our inner child, we're nurturing our soul, we're feeding our heart center and what's connected to the universe, and bringing down the corona, which is the gaseous aura around us that ultimately help us come into this present place where we are and also be connected to something so much higher. So it's natural that right now the programming is around be afraid of corona, when the truth is there's power in it in terms of the energetic perspective, which people don't understand. And so what Tim Wheatley and I will be guiding you who are here in the Zoom meeting and you who view this later are going to be able to experience is an introduction to the survival archetypes. Will be my contribution to the beginning of the summit. And the reason for wanting to share those survival archetypes is because, according to Carolyn Mace, who has a phenomenal book, this is the the back page, but Sacred Contracts by Carolyn Mace is an amazing book that if you are not familiar with it, I would highly recommend it, because this is actually where I pulled the content for the overview of the survival archetypes, which are the victim, child, prostitute, and saboteur. And so oftentimes when we hear the term prostitute, for instance, we get offended and you said, what about me? And ultimately it's not about selling your body, but it's about understanding that if we don't know our worth, we'll sell ourselves out for a price. Because until we actually have learned to become a guardian of faith, which is what the prostitute does when she or he becomes the sacred prostitute instead of the scared one, that is when then we move into actually using the prostitute symbiotically and in a positive way that can really support us. And the prostitute is very important for where we are as a collective right now, because everyone has a price. Until we understand our worth and then cannot sell ourselves out, because we understand what we won't trade ourselves for, which is when we step into the sacred side of ourselves. But when we're scared, there's a price. We'll do something, and it'll be to trade for physical safety. So the prostitute, instead of getting offended when someone says that about us, and what is an archetype but simply a familiar pattern we fill in with energy. If we understand that the prostitute can really serve us and help us take a stand for ourselves and our truth, we're going to move a lot easier through that process, because no longer are we looking to be offended. If we're not able to be sold out and we understand our worth, we don't need to show up looking to be offended anymore, because we understand that there is power not just in what other people think of us, but there's greater power inside of what we think of ourselves. And if we understand that the saboteur is the one who can take us out and knows exactly how to bring us down to our knees, and yet is also the guardian of choice, the one that has a core issue of inviting change into our life as a huge fear of this part of us here, because it, by being the guardian of choice, is the part of us that understands that we actually have the power to choose. We don't necessarily have the power to choose circumstances that come across our path and how those impact us. But what we do have the ability to do is how we're going to respond to those choices or those circumstances. We always get to choose. It's like Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning about his experience being in concentration camps, and how you could either lose your power completely because of the terror, and the war on terrorism is very much one when we look at the fear propaganda that is being sent to us. We very much then can really start to understand that to become a guardian of the faith and to choose to not allow those circumstances to define us, but to choose how we will show up to those circumstances, it changes everything, because then once again, it too moves into the sacred aspect of its own self. And the victim is the guardian of self-esteem. This is what I believe to be the warrior aspect of ourselves. And if the core issue of the victim is wondering whether trading our empowerment for the sake of fitting in is going to be worth the investment, if we understand that the victim is also the one that knows how to be victorious more than anybody else, more than any other part of us, the victim knows how to win. It's just they haven't understood how to bring their full presence together, so that no longer is it just the one at the bottom looking up at who's going to save them as the rescuer from the punisher or persecutor that ultimately is looking down at the victim and bullying them. Instead, it's bringing in the safeguards and the support system, like what we have in our doing by coming together for these summits. And there's information that's being shared, but ultimately there's community and there's connection, and then there's common ground. Because when we each have these tools, we can then use them in our own lives. We then have a community of familiar faces and people that are connecting and open to the same things that make us then know that we are not just the victim that's all alone on their own, needing someone else to save them, but instead we can team up with others who are willing to put themselves in the room to be able to gain access to the tools that can help them too. And that then takes us to the nature of the summits that Tim and I have been leading, which is the child. And the inner child is the part of being able to really guard our innocence and to become the parent to ourselves, which is the part that Tim will do after this, with being able to nurture the part of us on the inside that really needs support. And the core issue for the child is dependency and responsibility, because the child is terrified of having to support themselves. They just don't know that they can do it because they've never done it before. But how many of us actually have come to the place of realizing that all of us are children in varying stages of development? And that just because we have maybe reached the age of majority does not necessarily mean that we're truly grown up. Our body may be finished in its development cycle, or just until it then starts to go to the next cycle. It's never complete. But if the child is able to be made to feel safe within, because we have learned how to move that scared child into the sacred parental role within our own inner kingdom, we're going to be able to not only support ourselves, but support other people. And what I believe is that anyone that would actually invest any of their time to be in a meeting like this, it's because you are a lighthouse. You are someone who is shining light, and you may be one of the only ones like you that you know where you are, because ultimately we're all spaced out, and we're strategically spaced out in this experiment that is humanity on planet Earth, I believe. And if we understand that being spaced out, it's because we need to be where we are so that we can support and uplift the other people that are in the darkness of the training that we have culturally been indoctrinated into, that may or may not be serving us. But the majority of people are experiencing a lot of emotional crises right now because the system is designed to save itself, not us. But it sold itself and all of its propaganda to say it is for our health and it is for our well-being, when there's a part of us that knows that's not true. And the reason why these archetypes are so important to understand is we all share these four. That's why all of us understand it, because we're either filling each of them with energies that are in the light or that are in the shadow. But ultimately, we're filling these energies, and these energies are working directly with our intuition, which is the teacher that our soul hired ahead of time to come here and guide us through this journey of life. And if we are able to actually learn how to identify where we are operating within each of these archetypes, if we're able to bring that energy in, we can breathe in a different way than we've ever been able to before, because then we can watch the pattern and become the observer instead of the reactor to those things. And to react is to do the same action in the present moment that we have in the past. It's just recycled. But to respond is to say, okay, I'm feeling really angry right now. And it's reminding me of this story, which is where it's closer to the root story, because patterns will always show up to reveal themselves to us so that they can be released without having to have the same amount of splash that they did before we understood how to actually handle and process all that was coming up for us as we were working through a pattern. We're patterns people. That's what I'm coming to understand. And so if we can start to look at ourselves as patterns, and an assembly of patterns that are each like a little puzzle piece that fit together to make up who we think we are, because who we actually are is so much more than anything we could even imagine. It's just we're all doing the best we can, and until we know better, we can't do better. And once we know better and decide to do better, then we have to just keep continuing to make those choices to either empower ourselves or to play small in order to fit in to a society or a culture that would have us diminish ourselves for the sake of keeping others safe. And we all know you can't help anyone out of a ditch if you're in the ditch. So these summits, these opportunities to gather and unite and to gain some extra tools are an opportunity to say, hey, when we actually know how to work with our intuition, when we actually know how to be fully present, authentically present, and to call our power back and to recollect those soul fragments that we left in past moments, or even in future ones that maybe never came true and we wish did, if we can call all of that back, my God, our worlds change. We can't hear you, Tim. Sorry.
It only works if I turn on my microphone. I found that out. Really appreciate what you're saying there. When we're talking about the patterns of our lives, we really do come in with built-in patterns. We have built-in patterns from our family system. We have built-in patterns of our society that we're currently in. So yeah, part of what I was thinking of on this is Lisa Feldman Barrett speaks of the patterns and how they show up in our lives as predictions. It's actually that we're not feeling these things that come up, we're predicting them. They come from our past and all of the archetypes that you spoke of. And I was just going through thinking on how many parallels there are in our lives, whether it's psychological work, whether it's spiritual work, whether it's personal growth work, whether it's life coaching, business coaching. all of these now are overlapping with each other, the more and more that we start to discover exactly what's being, well, basically what we're made of and why we do what we do and why we don't do what we don't do. And sometimes that's more important.
Before we go into it deeper, where you're going to take us, Tim, does anyone have any feedback about the 4 survival archetypes that would anyone acknowledge or be able to say that you're in the sacred aspect of your survival archetypes more than you're not? Is anybody that could actually raise their hand, and I'm not doing it necessarily as one that always does, because certainly I get scared more. I get scared often because I'm stretching and I'm growing, and it's like we talked about last week. Our body processes excitement and fear in the same way. If we're on the edge of a cliff or we're going to lead a summit that we have no idea what to expect, our body is, and we have to get over ourselves. But every time we do it, we stretch ourselves and we stretch our comfort zone just a little bit more, and it gives us permission to just go there, go where the child has no idea what they can do, and we say, you know what, honey, we got this. I got this. You got this, because I got this, and we together have this, which I feel is like what right now as a collective, if we can really just learn to be nice to ourselves, to come together, to breathe ourselves back into those moments and actually register what's going on instead of just reacting to it, so much will change for us. And concept therapy was originated by Thurman Fleet. And Thurman Fleet basically drew a stickman figure, so with a big head and then a little body and off to an R. So that's just the visual to break it down for you. And what that visual really is useful for, and I was going to write on here, and as Chantal messaged me, my board's too small, which my other board that's bigger is in front of me, and it's got things written on from the last 3 summits that I didn't want to erase because I may have a slight hoarding issue with ideas. And I come across so many amazing ideas that it's like, oh yeah, write that down. And then it's just hard for me to sometimes release it because I know that we haven't fully used it by the time I'm ready to move on and write something else. So that's the honest truth as to why I've got a small board behind me and why I'm not using a board to give the explanation of Thurman Fleet's visual. But basically, if you break that top circle for the head into 2 halves, what you get is a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is actually in the heart, because the subconscious mind is our feeling mind, whereas the conscious mind is our thinking mind. So the thinking mind is able to process approximately 2,000 bits of information per second, whereas the feeling mind is able to process 2 million bits of information in that same amount of time. It's running all of our bodily functions without our even thinking about it, which is why it's under the conscious mind in the unconscious. And basically, if we actually begin to understand that we don't develop that conscious mind until the age of 7, approximately, what we have to then understand is that the subconscious mind, which becomes like a filing cabinet that contain all choices and all thoughts and all beliefs, which essentially are simply thoughts that we've repeated enough time, they have familiarity to them. Each of those ideas is like a file within the cabinet of our mind, in the heart. And so before the age of 7, we don't have the filter to keep those outside negative inputs out, and we just receive it. So people can vomit straight into our subconscious because so many people are being so unconscious in how they're living and how they're talking to other people. And it's important to understand that if everybody is puking their ideas and beliefs into us and we don't have a fully developed filtration system, it's very easy for us to take on other people's garbage. so to speak, without understanding that it wasn't always ours, but because by the time we actually recognize it, we've known it was there for so long, then we think that it was. And we are creatures that have all aspects within us. All potentialities are within us. It's just the ones that have more energy are the ones that we go to more often, more frequently, more fluidly. And so if we understand that the conscious and subconscious mind are only one aspect of us, then we move into the body, which is actually where the law of attraction comes in. Because of the law of attraction, what are the 6 most important letters? Action. Nothing changes until we change, and then we're willing to move ourselves into a changed environment too. So if the body represents action, leading over to the results, what we have to understand is that most people are actually leading a life that is more effects or results focused. And if you want to change your results, then you know that you need to change your thoughts. And that is true, but we can actually reverse that order to make it easier for ourselves by consciously coming up with the pattern that we want to bring into the creative process. So that was a piece that I wanted to build off of the 4 survival archetypes, simply because if we know how to actually bring ourselves back into the moment, and if we know how, we understand why the subconscious mind is so much more powerful. And even though I thought I changed that one thing about myself that I didn't like so much, and I've been working so hard on it and it's still coming up, WTF, that is ultimately because it's still going to be like a file within the cabinet of our subconscious mind. It's just, instead of having 10 papers because we reference it 10 times a day, it's only going to maybe have eight papers left, because in the process of redirecting our focus away from it onto something that we can intentionally put in there instead, then we actually are redirecting the energy that we used to direct over there and now can direct into what we're choosing to create instead, which is part of the reason these summits are happening. These summits are to gather the people together to create new files, because we've all heard of these conspiracy theories, and you who know me know that I've explored many of them. And ultimately, what you come to the fact of getting back to is that that's somebody else's dream that we're giving our energy to. And it's very easy and distracting to go down their paths. And it's not to say that their path's the wrong one. It's just to say, how do you feel when you're going down that path? Because that's important. And if we're feeling fearful, then we're not going to be able to help anyone out of that ditch, because ultimately that ditch is only leading us deeper into their trench. And if that's the case, of which I've been finding myself falling into the trap of over the last many months, and then finding ways to revert and get myself out of it. And these summits are tools that I've created for myself and for you who choose to appreciate the opportunity to connect with other people by joining live or by listening back to them later. So that's one of the ways that I am doing my efforts to dream a new dream that we can dream together. And there's more of us than there are of them. And whoever them is, we don't even know, because the shadow government that actually run the world are in the shadows for a reason. Our responsibility and what we're doing is bringing our own shadow aspects into the light, so that way, if there's more light within us because we've been willing to burn out more of the shadow, there will be fewer spaces of tolerance for those shadows in the world outside of ourselves, because no longer can we hide the shame of what's happening out there in here as easily. So Tim, I'm going to say, unless anyone else would like to make a contribution based on what's been shared so far, then I'm going to let you take over the lead.
Okay. One of the things going into nurturing the parent team within, it was part of the law of attraction is something that isn't really discussed, and before I get into nurturing, I just want to touch on that for a second. And that's the part of ourselves when we put our positive affirmations, our desired states out there. We talked about this in some of the other recordings that are up there. And it's the positive things that we're looking for. And then all of a sudden, the negative is brought into our life. And all of the top spiritual teachers on the law of attraction make it very, very clear that when there is a counter intention, when there is an unconscious belief, when there is contrary thoughts, when we have our adverse childhood effects or experiences or some other characteristics that are stuck in our unconscious where we don't actually believe, the law of attraction will magnetically pull that little part of us who is not believing that they are good enough or that they're unlovable or undeserving or unworthy. They'll bring that into the light. And a lot of people start freaking out on why they're bringing in all of this negative, when actually that's part of bringing it back together to be that which you seek. And one of the interesting things that happened along that line was I was doing a sweat lodge once. And when I went in, there were a lot of people that were praying to great grandfather that they have love in their life, or that they have abundance in their life, or that they have peace in their life. And afterwards, I talked to the elder running the sweat lodge, and I said, why? I don't understand why people do that, because they're praying for their natural state. And you can't pray for something that is a natural occurring state. The only thing you can do is pray that the blocks be removed so that you can regain that natural state. Reintegration is so vital. And he was just saying he's seen it until that doesn't work anymore. And it's one of our characteristics as humans, is just the way that our brains work, is we're going to try and try and try and try to prove that I'm good enough, to prove that I'm lovable, to prove that I'm deserving, to prove that I'm worthy. And actually, at the end of the day, the way our brains work with the automatic nervous system and the unconscious and the conscious, which I'm going to get into now, we actually have to reparent that part that has this mistaken belief. And, you know, we talked about connection and we talked about correction previously. And now I may have to go back over some of those thoughts in my own mind, but we're going to talk about nurturing the parental team within. The parental team is you and that little part of you. And when it comes to that little part of you, it's sometimes difficult to get in contact. For me, it was difficult for me to get in contact with that spoiled, rotten little brat called Timmy. And but I did, and then we started having a really good chat about things, about what he was believing that happened as a child. And it was only then that all of a sudden I realized why my entire life was formed in a way to bring him back into my life. And so nurturing the parental team first, when can we activate this parental team nurturing? And the biggest part is when a trigger happens. When we're triggered, when we get pissed off, when we're getting upset, when our heart is racing. You know, we've got the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, and these are clues as to that little part of you needs some nurturing right there. For example, traditional psychology, and we're talking about emotions, when they come up, when an anger or upset or sadness comes up, we suppress it. We repress it. There's distancing from that emotion. Whatever comes up, we don't want to feel it, back it away. distraction, pulling in things to distract us so we don't have to. And I think COVID has been a blessing and a curse for a lot of people, because the way that they used to suppress their emotions, repress them, distance, or distract have been taken away. Most people are, in some form of lockdown around the world. And now we're unfortunately or very fortunately, having to address these emotions that are coming up. So we talked about the connection to that pain source previously, about connecting to little you. We talked about correcting that little part of you. And when it comes to nurturing, we must see that little part of us as only like a 4 or 5-year-old, because that's the part that is holding those emotions trapped. So our brain, parasympathetic nervous system, the automatic nervous, whenever we get triggered, something is happening inside our body. And so you got to think of your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system like your car's gas and brakes. So if you're going to go anywhere to get there, you have to use both. And yes, the sympathetic nervous system is great to keep you alive when you're in true danger. But unfortunately, this part of our brain gets activated and triggered every single time we see a mask, every time we watch the news, every time, here Dr. Bonnie tells us how many people are sick this day. All of those continue to reactivate the sympathetic nervous system, which shuts down everything else in our body. So we need to understand what is being triggered, what's being activated emotionally for us. We have to go back to connect with when this happened. And that was part of what we did before with connecting. When we get triggered, go back and connect with that little part of you. So when it comes to the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, I mean, it's important because it's not just, we could go into the woo-woo world, the very spiritual component, and say the same thing. Religious people have been doing it for centuries, talking about how the devil made me do it, how the angels versus the devil. So now what we're doing is we're actually understanding that these are components of ourselves. And, like I realize even in India, with all of the deities that are out there, these are all components of ourself. They're all parts of our fragmented psyche, that when we start bringing them back and being solid, whole, complete, that's when our soul is activated. Our soul's lesson is activated through our inner child wounds, our core wounds. This is what you're here to learn. This is what you're here to teach. And this is what you're here to share and help others with. So getting into the sympathetic nervous system is when little Timmy gets afraid. He gets scared. There's this fight or flight response that automatically comes up in our brain. We do have genetic predispositions through our DNA of what has happened to us generationally. But now we have a tendency to go, we feel our heart rate go up, we feel, we start sweating, our eyes dilate, we start freaking out, we get angry, we start fighting back, or we take the hell out. You either fight with your, like, for example, it's either fighting with your girlfriend or getting the hell out and slamming the door as you go. There's your fight and your flight response mechanism. And yes, we do have the freeze mechanism, which sort of like zones out and we don't hear a single thing. When actually all that's wanted is connection. That's what's underneath all of the fight, flight, fright, or fight, flight, fright response and freeze, is just wanting true connection. But it's that little part of us that when that gets triggered, we have to connect instantly with that little part of ourselves just for a second. You know, tune into your feelings, find out what's going on. Like, and I know this is controversial, always has been, but surprise, surprise. I'm saying that men feel more than women. And this is an example of when if you ask a man, you know, what are you feeling about this? The mind of a man has like this round wheel with about 1,000 different feelings all at the same time, but they're all equal percentages. Like, you know, women have this, like they're like 25% this or 50% that and 10% that. But when it comes to a guy, we spin the wheel and they're all the same. It can be, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, all at the same time. And so one of the difficulties for men especially is to tune into your feelings. And next is we have to honor that. We have to honor where the feelings come from. And when you do check in with your feelings, you can go, oh my God, you know what? That's just like when I was with so-and-so, and when I was so-and-so, and then when my mom did that. And then you can connect with that little child, like before when we were talking in the other sessions about connecting with that inner child. Validate the sadness, validate the upset, validate the anger. You know, and people get confused that validation means you have to act on it, when the opposite is actually true. When we can validate our emotions, we control the reaction and the action that we take with those. After you tune into your feelings, you connect with and validate that little part of you that has felt that for a very long time, and you go back with that little part of you to the past, then all of a sudden you can change their belief, which is a foundation. And, you know, people say, change your thoughts, change your actions, change your deeds. But what they forget is the actual part is change your belief, which creates your thoughts. And I'm not talking about the family or societal beliefs. I'm talking about those 4 primary ones of being unlovable, undeserving, unworthy, and not good enough. And once you remind them of what happened did not mean that they are still lovable, that they are still good enough, they are worthy and deserving regardless of what happened, and regardless of whether or not our parents could express that or not express that, then that little part of you can accept you as that parent, the new parent. And this is where you start to join that bond between you and that little part of you. And then you can remind that little part, you're not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden you'll have clarity without your body going into hyper reaction mode through your automatic nervous system. Then you have clarity that's, oh, right, I guess I was a jerk. You know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that kind of thing. And what happens over time when you continue to develop and nurture this parental bond that you have with that inner child of yours, there's something called emotional chronometry. It's a great word. I think I came up with it. And what it means is, okay, you've always heard people like, man, they are so quick to anger. Like they lose their shit instantly. Like I've known guys like that I grew up with. And then so there's a scale of going up. And it's how fast you are to quick to anger. And then how long you stay upset. And then how quick you come down. So there are people that hold a grudge. There's people that, I met somebody and I hadn't seen them for 10 years. And they said how pissed off they were at me. I'm like, after 10 years? You're still pissed off? About what? And they told me. I had no memory. I had no memory of what they were saying. And like, I'm just like, like, dude, sorry, man. Like, I had no idea that I said that or upset you in that way. So his anger maybe took a long time to, like a slow crock pot finally getting hot enough up there. Then he held that for 10 years. And then the next part is coming down, going from a state of upset to a state of calmness. When this is where your now their neuroscientists finding out your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nerve system is this part where it goes up and where it stays and comes down. So this is an important muscle, because the more you utilize realizing what is upsetting you, this distance of chronometry starts getting slower, and from the time you get angry to the time you calm down, but also it starts going like this. Instead of it being like this, way up there, you're not quite as upset as you once were. And realizing through this work that it wasn't you that were upset in the first place. You're a grown-ass adult, for Pete's sakes, but it was that little part of you. And the more you honor that emotions, you validate that inner child, the one that is really, really, truly upset. This is where the chronometry, which means the time it takes for you to get angry and then calm, slows down. And right now, if you take a look at what's going on in this world, we're seeing, unfortunately, we are being stimulated to stay up in that very top part. And in our anger or upset about the current situation is holding us up there. And the results physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually are detrimental. And, I take a look at, what's going on in the world. And, one of the things that I do is it's new to a lot of people. It's called read. And, and I was reading this document today in one of the scientific journals, and it was pointing out the characteristics of people that survived the tsunami are similar physically to those that have that long-term effect from COVID. The same kind of things. And if you take a look at how the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous has on our body, our minds, our well-being, our overall well-being, this is a tool to get that parasympathetic nervous action in quick, where we hit the brakes, we drop down, we calm our body down. And, like going into the emotions, it's interesting because people talk about, say, for example, being angry. And when I take a look at anger, and, I remember one of my first workshops with Est back in the 80s was expressing anger. Primal screaming, banging on tables, hitting pillows. And I understood, I'm emoting anger. But I still never addressed how I felt about that anger. How do you feel about the emotions are more important than expressing it. And what I mean about that is, say, for example, you do work. You do personal growth work or spiritual evolution. You sit with teachers, and then you get upset about something. So then you feel guilty for feeling upset. And then you feel frustrated about feeling guilty, but then you feel sad about feeling frustrated and guilty. And then you start going, you're upset about being angry again. So it's this cycle that just avoids it because we're not addressing how we feel about those emotions. And again, we're grown-ass adults. We know better. So it's not the knowing part of our brain that we actually have to address. We have to address the emotion part, which is that little part. That, to me, it's little Timmy down there. So when these come up, it's addressing, where do they come from? Like, when was it that you couldn't express these anger? And when was it that you wanted to? Then give permission. Like this isn't a free for all, but there are ways of which you can allow that to be expressed. Because as we have clearly seen around the world, when anger, sadness, any kind of emotion really is suppressed or repressed, it leaks out in very unhealthy ways. And this is one of the things I can never forget, watching that preacher who for 20 years had been condemning homosexuality and prostitutes and everything else. And then he got caught with one. And then it was like, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And it's like, well, you've repressed all of these emotions without addressing them. So if we connect with these emotions and we nurture this relationship, when this stuff comes up, we don't have to act on them. We can address them. We can acknowledge them in a state that is more conducive for growth and change and reintegration. And going back now as a kid with a lot of the things that we have heard. I discussed this about the theta brainwave as a child, but it's funny how it's easier to learn something by hearing it over and over again than to unlearn something by hearing something new. And that's how our brain works. We have unconsciously locked a lot of these beliefs in there, but we may know better, but we must address the denials. One of the things in the 1800s, in the late 1800s in Unity Church, they were talking about affirmations, but the denials, addressing the denials. This was I think that book was published in 1905. And they're talking about addressing that unconscious part. So anyway, let's get into what kind of parent we could be. How we can parent that little part of us. And I think empathetic understanding of our own emotions is important. Like we have to approach this with compassion. Most of us have had parents. There are about 4 different types. And what we need to do is not repeat what we know with our own inner child. Meaning like we've had the dismissing parent. So every time you get upset, example, that parent could treat the child's feelings that they're unimportant, they're trivial. And how have we done that to our own little part that is upset, angry, sad? We might go to meditation. We might do positive affirmations. We might crack a bottle of wine open, or some people might do crack, yoga, hanging out with friends. And all of that, this dismissing parent, is just a way of disengaging and ignoring that little part of us. And again, how many times are we going to have to repeat this over and over and over again in order to actually connect and make the change? So we can't be the dismissing parent. We have to actually stop minimizing our emotions. And it normally comes down to choice, chance, or crisis before people address things. And we can't do that. We have to take a stand that when these emotions start to come up, not when they explode out of our mind, but when they start to come up, we honor them. We stop it there before this massive forest fire is burning all over California. If they would have simply just blown out the match to start, might not have happened. Anyway, the dismissing parent. So a lot of that from the dismissing kind of parent, that little part continues to anchor in that they're wrong, that they're inappropriate, that they're not valid, that no matter what, they feel they're not good enough. And if we don't stop being that dismissive parent, that little part of us then will go out looking externally for validation and help. And, I mean, that's part of how our brains work. And unfortunately, that ego mind that is saying, go ask them. You never got it as a kid. Go ask, find it from somebody else. What the ego promises, the truth, is the complete opposite of that. And the only one that can authentically deliver that acknowledgement and validation is you. Next, we might have had a disapproving parent that was just, no matter what we did, it was always wrong. It was never good enough. Example, swamp people. Swamp People, I was watching it one day, and the guy was talking about, he just shot himself a 20-foot gator and was so proud. His dad's going to be so proud of him. And he pulls up to the dock and he said, hey, Dad, take a look. I got myself a 20-footer. And his dad went, yeah, I got myself a 25-footer yesterday. Turns and walks away. So that little part is instantly disapproved of. Again, dismissing it. And how often do you do that on a regular basis? If something you do at work or something, like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Why would you do something like that? You got to stop this shit. I can't believe you're such an idiot. And this criticizing and judging is actually coming back. The person that hears that is that little inner child. And it just reaffirms to that little part that has that belief. And now you're confirming it, that little part is stupid, unlovable, undeserving, unworthy, definitely not good enough. And we have to stop the judging and criticizing when it starts to come up. How do we do that? Here's the tip number 1 for the day on dismissing or disapproving. Go find a picture of you when you were around 5 to 8, and you put that up on your fridge, so that there are moments when, say, for example, you had a bad day, you're feeling crap. Go to the picture and start yelling at that picture, that little part of you. Go in and start saying how stupid you are. I can't believe you're such an idiot. How dare you? And you will then all of a sudden start to truly feel the sense and depth of that punishment that little part of you is feeling. And all of a sudden there'll be a switch. And it's like, dude, man, sorry, buddy. I was just having a bad day. It didn't mean anything. And you are good enough just the way you are. This is just one small step that you can do.
That's huge, though. Sometimes the greatest change starts with something so small. And it's like, I have 2 pictures on my desk. I don't mean to cut in, but I have 2 pictures on my desk of when I was like 5 and when I in my little T-ball, and we only played 1 year and it was a disaster, but nonetheless. And then when I was in like maybe 8, and it's like, you were saying what you were saying. And I say this for the perspective of assumptions too, because it's just like, I was kind of, expecting the love and light, have your child there and love them and talk to them. And that's what I do with mine. And then it's like, you say, scream at them when you're having a bad day. And it's like, holy wow, that is a completely different exercise than what I was expecting. But how powerful, because I would never consider doing that to the little version of me. It's like, I look at the little version of me that had her hair cut off and then went to school and people called me a dog and a boy and, all of those ways that they shamed me, and I accepted it and I took it personally and thought I was ugly and, all of those things. And it's just like, wow, I would never talk to her that way. She already went through enough. But powerful, powerful exercise, Tim. Carry on. Unless anyone else has something that you wanted to reference in terms of what's coming up for anyone else. Everybody's so eager. You don't have to. You can raise your hand.
The time for sharing is coming to a close. This was back in Est back in the 1980s when they were talking about things that were coming up and no one was really coming up, we would go, okay, the time for sharing is coming to a close. And normally it would get to be about like that. And then someone would go, okay, I got something to say. So anyway, boom. That was that quick. Going into just another way of parenting is the laissez-faire. Let it be, whatever. And that's the kind of component where we don't take accountability or responsibility or ownership for our emotions, our upsets, and whatever. You blow it off, which means you're blowing little you off. You're not allowing and honoring the emotions that are coming up whenever they come up. So it's something that's the other one. We have to provide a mechanism for that little part to have that voice. And I spoke about that before with the shadow box exercise. If you've got an indoor cat, for example, but you don't have a kitty litter box, where does it shit? Anywhere it wants to. And if you don't have a place for that, the negative chatter voice or that upset, sad little part of you to come out, where does it come out? Anywhere it wants to. When it's angry, it comes out in road rage. Because we all know when that guy cut you off in traffic, we all know that he purposely and deliberately figured out where you were at what time, woke up in the morning, planned it to the split second of when he was going to follow you and cut you off. We all know that because that's just the logical part of us. We know he deliberately tried to cut us off and had it all planned and structured. So actually, we got to honor that little part. So what happens with the upset that comes out in the car? What happens, like, for example, if you have a child that's with you and you're traveling somewhere and they say, like, Mom, Dad, I want a cookie. I said, well, we don't have any. I want a cookie. And started screaming and said, okay, hon, absolutely. I hear you want a cookie. I don't have one here, but as soon as we get back to the house, I'll give you one. Oh, okay. Now that's the same kind of technique that we can use. Tip number 2 is when these things come up, which are, we don't have the space or it's not a right spot for us to start any work. We can just, give ourselves a little fist bump. If it's give a little fist bump on the table and just say, I got your back. We can talk about this later. I'm not going anywhere. It's good. So we're not discounting. We're not negating those emotions. We're honoring them briefly and giving them the tool to allow that to come out later on. Now, going back to what type of parents, we also have the helicopter parent. This is just constantly smothering, that is always hanging over top, that never lets a child do anything on their own, that is always making sure. And all that does is it makes that little part of them feel that they're not good enough. And, I said this before in one of the stories in one of my trainings, they were talking about the emotional upset of a child. And I say that, kids have a toggle switch. They have an on, off. They're angry, it's on. You look at kindergarten. When they're angry, they'll grab hair, they're still pulling. They're like, these are like 3-year-olds that are just click the emotion, they're up, they're angry. They're sad, it's 100%. They're completely devastated when an ice cream falls on the floor. That's complete, utter devastation. So we have to acknowledge that all of those emotions that come up, whatever they are, have validity. Maybe not to us as a grown-ass adult, but they have validity to that little part of us. And our thinking brain may rationalize and try to discount those emotions as nothing. Oh, don't be stupid. Those are nothing. Some parents say, oh, they gotta learn on their own, but it doesn't work that way. When we start nurturing and we bring these components back together through emotional awareness, connection, correction, and we continue to do this together, we will have an authentic, high sense of self-esteem. We'll be able to do things that have the result of what we are truly looking for, what we truly desire in our life, so that we don't have to have little you work through the unlovability with a new spouse so that you're constantly fighting. The soul contract with that person doesn't have to come into play, because this is where my true soul contact is. You know, this is who I truly am, is me and that little part of me. So making sense of feelings, and here's the real key part: to make sense of their feelings and the situation that brought them up. Because it's, you know, it's real easy to go back and do this bonding and nurturing that part, but still negate our accountability and responsibility and ownership for how little me acted out through me. I still have to take ownership of that, ownership of it, and responsibility for it. But accountability is actually saying, you know what, I'm sorry, man, this just, it brought up the same kind of stuff that I went through as a kid. And, you know, it reminded me that, you know, regardless of whether or not my mom or dad could actually express that they love me, I was good at, I am lovable, and I am good enough just the way I am. So I just wanted to apologize for what I did. So it's important on the three components: accountability, ownership, and responsibility. And I think we'll develop that more and more once we continue to nurture this relationship that we had. One thing is to view your inner child's fears, sadness, anger as an opportunity for intimacy and teaching. The correction that will take place isn't just a one-time, or, I mean, kind of the opposite. It can be a one-time thing where little you is always upset about the one thing. When you go back and you do the connection and correction like we talked about before, and you're nurturing this, all of a sudden they join with you, and that emotion now becomes a dial, not a toggle switch. They're like, oh, that really bummed me out. So they're not devastated. And then you continue to go on and on and on and build this relationship. And again, don't do the minimizing thing, right? Oh, don't be silly. There's nothing to worry about. You know, I got your back. Don't be stupid. No, we have to honor and cherish the emotions, because there's a lot of amazing stuff that little part is just waiting to share with you. And that little part has so much damn energy. Like, I mean, kids that are 3, 4, 5, they have so much energy. It's just crazy. And that's what's waiting for us when we build our relationship and we continue to nurture this. Again, next thing, validate the child's fears, whatever it is that is upset, honor them. They're not silly. I mean, as an adult, we may think that a monster under the bed is really just silly. But to the little kid that was on that bed, he was terrified. So we have to honor, as these emotions start to come up, we have to honor them on a regular basis. So as an adult, what can we do to help our parasympathetic nervous system drop down quickly? Once we do our connection, once we connect with that little part of it, our body's still in reaction. And people say, well, you know, it can stop instantly. I say, absolutely. Because when you wake up from a nightmare, you instantly stop and go, oh, that was just a dream, right? No, you're sweating, your heart rate is going, you've been scared, you've got this massive nightmare, or you're afraid, or somebody died in your dream and you're so devastated. You don't wake up and just go, Oh, that was a dream. Woo, woo. Our brains don't understand that. And the emotion and how our chemicals are being gone through our body, through being triggered through the vagus nerve. And it's just a mess. So we have to honor how our body reacts, even as that little part of us is being triggered from our past. So, number one, cold. Cold exposure drops the parasympathetic nerve. It allows that brake to get activated. So, after your shower in the morning, last 30 seconds, cold water. Or, you know, if you live up in the northern climates, go outside on the t-shirt for a minute. You know, just allow that coldness to come in. Or you can do that Wim Hof method with ice baths. I'll leave that to you guys. If you want to do ice baths, I'll pass now. Deep and slow breaths. Like I teach a lot of breath work, which is fast, but deep, slow breaths allow the parasympathetic nerve to allow it to stop the automatic nervous system, cutting off everything else. And this is what's going on now. Like our bodies are in stress mode because of COVID and all of the stimulation that we're getting around that. So one of the things is deep, slow breath. One that I found funny was singing, humming, chanting. Doing any of those as even on a ritual basis, singing, humming, chanting, that in itself will put the brakes on and allow your parasympathetic nerve system to activate, shutting off the other ones, which are all the stress hormones, and allow your body just to come back to a natural state quicker. Physically, you can take probiotics. They're really good. Omega-3 fatty acids are really good. Meditation slows that down. And again, do that after you've connected, right? Like not before, because you can use that as a way of distracting Lily. Hey, shut up. I'm meditating right now. But bring him with you. Bring that little part of you with you. Exercise. One of the Japanese masters was always saying, do things in sprints, not in jogging. If you're going to exercise and you're going to go for a run, sprint, then walk. Sprint, and then walk. It's a way that your body regulates itself better. And massage. Hopefully soon I'll be going to Mexico, and there's a lot of massage mister on Fifth Avenue there in Playa del Carmen. The next one is, the last one is a little bit more difficult, and that's socializing and laughing. And in whatever way we can, we must maintain our socializing. You know, this is so vital right now. And laughing, allow the parasympathetic nerve to get in its full plane and laugh. So after this, go watch a funny movie. There's some good ones out there that have just come out. And I think it's important that we have a laugh. One of the things I always said, if we don't laugh at our own ego, everyone else will. So it's important that we, even though like this is like, oh my God, I can't believe how silly I was. I was just like so angry. And then I realized where it came from, you know, and then I was actually just projecting this onto you. And this is a way of what the one person was talking about with predictions. Most of our feelings, the way our brain is wired, is predicting that it's going to be what little you felt as a kid. It's predicting it. We're not, and these anticipating. And you can hear that, unfortunately, in a lot of people's voices when they're talking about things. Yeah, but you know that'll never happen. Oh, if that, yeah, right. So we have to, when something is coming up like that in our own way, that we start writing our own negative beliefs right in front of us. Like, that will never happen. This is the most stupid thing. We have to stop for a second. And this goes back to a long training ago, is we're writing this stuff right in front of us on a plexiglass. So when it's in front of us, that's what we will see through. This is never going to happen. So if these things start to come out, just erase them real quickly and blow them off. It's a neat thing that was taught years ago in the 80s as a way of just stopping the negative rumination going over and over and over in your brain. So again, just to go back over, step one, pay attention of your emotions, witness them without a place of judgment. You know, get aware of the emotions, because it'll allow us to get back to a state of calmness quicker. Connect with that little part of you that is feeling that. Listen to that little part. And, you know, part of that means journaling. Take time to journal what that little part of you wants. You know, step 4, honor it. Honor where it came from. This is your soul's path. This is your soul's lesson. This is what you're here to teach together, not separate. Separate, we teach our struggle. Together, we teach our way out of our struggle. And the last one is continue this nurturing, continue to connect, continue to allow time for your parasympathetic nervous system to drop quickly. You know, the best things for your mind, your body, and your soul are doing this. And I think that's one of the benefits. So next time you get triggered, realizing that there's that little part of you that's wanting some attention. And that's all it is. And just remind it, you know, like, it's like, man, I got so triggered. And it's like, oh, damn. I left little Timmy sitting at the mall. Damn it. I got to go pick him up. Those are the kind of things. It's like, what happened? Where did that start? Where did the emotion start? Track it back, connect with that little part of you, and bring it back home. And this is all about just bringing it back home. All right. Thank you.
Well done. And Chantal, did you have something you had wanted to say as well? I saw.
Yeah, it's about the vagus nerve reset thing. Well, I actually found one this morning, and it reset me like so fast, because I get anxious like constantly. So I don't talk very much. I just have to constantly try to keep myself level. And today I came across this one, and it worked within minutes. And you just have to like interlace your fingers and put it behind your head, and you look to the right as far as you can for like 30 to 60 seconds. And then you do the other side, and then you come back and you do a check of before and after of how tight your neck is. And by the time you're done doing all that, it was total calm. And I tried it 4 or 5 times today, every time I got anxious, which is way too often. And it worked every time. And it was so quick.
What if every time you got anxious, it wasn't way too often, it was the fact that you were processing energies that were coming up for the collective, and you were graciously willing to transmute those for all of us? So instead of judging yourself, who is a mirror to everyone who is watching, and judging themselves for judging their emotions in those moments, what if instead we were willing to be graceful with ourselves and to say, I get anxious because the little girl inside of me didn't feel worthy, didn't feel supported, didn't feel safe in that moment. And that anxiety was simply letting me know that I wasn't actually present, because what I heard from the exercise is 30 seconds this way is really in your body.
You have to keep your nose forward.
Oh.
And just turn your eyes. It's about, like resetting.
Fair. And that though is, so thank you for clarifying, because that's useful for the exercise piece.
Yeah.
But what if in that experience, what we're actually doing is just calling ourselves back present.
Yeah.
Because our emotions are when we're not present, because we left Timmy at the mall, or little Laura somewhere else, or little Chantal, little Marcus, little Jesse, little Yvonne. It's an opportunity for us to be able to really get ourselves back in the moment and to just use these tools. And if anyone else has a tool that you use to call yourself back to the moment, or to work with the inner child within you, or to even release the judgments in those moments, because when you experience all of that with the training that you have, you're letting those judgments go faster, right? And every time you're doing that, you're creating a new file, and you're adding energy to that file instead of the other file, and you have these two competing files in there regardless. It's just moving the energy. And then I was listening earlier today, actually, I heard somebody say about it's only our attachment to time and space and the linear nature of things that make us feel like healing needs to take any period of time other than to do it now. Because truly, if all time is only happening now, then this moment is the only one where we can choose to say, oh, I'm back. And what if we actually made that something we did for ourselves? How we smile and just kind of chuckle because it's silly and it's simple. What if it's the little child inside us? I could use that. I could use that. Okay. So what can I say to myself in that moment when I'm feeling anxious and I call myself back? It's like, how could we make ourselves laugh? How could we make a little joke with the inner child inside instead of saying, again? Like, it could become a joke that we say with the little child inside. It's just like, wow, you're really emotional today. But that little child's going to always be emotional, because until the age of 7, before the conscious mind is fully developed, they're fully emotional beings. They have no thinking or rational abilities. They're just in the emotion. So of course they have a lot of energy. Energy in motion is what emotion is. And emotion is just vibration, different frequencies, different experiences, different feelings that come from our interpretation of those energies moving around in our space. Ooh, Marcus.
Okay, I just didn't want to interrupt. I have my own way to connect with my inner child and just calm myself down. And I think what worked the best for me so far was mindfulness. And I know Tim was mentioning it at some point. I was hoping to be higher up the list, because for me that's the number one thing I go to. And I think it really helps to, connect with yourself, to have the awareness when something happens in your life and know how to get back, and instead of being reactive, to actually take a moment, step back and look at the what's happening at your emotion, and try to make a rational decision instead of a reactive one, led by emotion. I really like what what was said here. Although I might not necessarily agree with all the different ways people deal with their emotions. I think it's useful. It's a lot of interesting for me. I also want to thank Chantal for sharing the way she deals with her anxiety. I think we can all learn from each other. And whatever works for some people, it might work for others too. So yeah, I'm very grateful to be part of this experience with you, and thank you for sharing this with me.
Thank you for coming. We are truly all so much better when we're together, which is why we're being separated right now as a people. Like, I had the realization a couple of days ago with everything that is in my heart to bring to this world. And it's just like, wow, there's the part of me that really had the realization that we need our people strong. And then when we say our people, you say, you're not a president. It's not your people. Well, excuse me, why not? Who says? And it's like that Marianne Williamson poem, Our Deepest Fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. For it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And we ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, talented, gorgeous, and fabulous? But actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, born to manifest the glory of God that is within you. And regardless of which box we put God into, ultimately, when we drop those walls and we realize that the foundation is just what makes us feel safe, which is actually the virtues, that little child, the guardian of innocence, that little child is there to uphold that for us, to remind us of our power, to help us reconnect with our self-esteem and our faith and our power of choices.
I really love that quote, Marianne's quote. I recently had to work on an assignment for college, and part of it was to watch Coach Carter's movie, and that quote was used there. It was a little different version, but I just love that quote. So I'm glad you brought it up. It's just like, it's one of the best quotes, I love that. So thank you.
My pleasure. And that quote has been part of my life since 2009, when I was part of one of the first mastermind groups that I joined on Think and Grow Rich, to learn from people further down the rabbit hole, or that had went down and learned more and could offer guidance, because I knew I couldn't figure it out on my own, because I was, young 20s and just hungry to become more of who I already was, to uncover and unpeel and unveil myself, to reveal who this being that I am is. And it's like I was in that group and I gained access to that poem, and I just reveled in it. And I shared it everywhere I could with everyone I could, which is why I remember it now, to be able to recite the way that I can. And that is just the power of repetition. And it's also to say that that quote has been misattributed to Nelson Mandela and Tony Robbins, and maybe one day even me, because John Maxwell, I'm a certified coach with the John Maxwell program, and so I've had the pleasure and privilege of spending time with John and Paul Martinelli and the faculty within the program. And John used to, in one of his presentations, he had said about how the first time you quote somebody, you say, oh, so-and-so said this, and it was absolutely amazing. And then the next time you're going to be sharing or referencing that quote, you say, someone said, and then you say it. And then the next time, the third time, that when you reference that very same thing that previously you gave credit to the author for, then you say, I was thinking. And it's just the fact that there is no real original ideas in this world. We have this idea that there is, and my computer is going to, or my phone is going to die if I don't hook it in, and I didn't want to break away. What were you going to say, Jesse?
No.
You want Chantel to share her? I didn't catch that.
He's put in the chat that he'd like me to share the relaxing technique. Is that me that you wanted to?
Yeah.
Yeah? The reset? It's very simple, and it's, it doesn't take very long. You just have to lay flat and put your hands, interlace your fingers and put it behind your head. And then then you just keep your nose facing forward. keep yourself centered, and then look to the right for 30 seconds the first time. Put your head, you got to keep your head straight. So in your hands, try to keep the back of your skull stationed, and keep your nose here, and just look with your eyes only. Yeah, for 30 to 60 seconds. And then when you come back, you center again, and then you go to the left the same way for 30 to 60 seconds, and then come back. And then after that, you would sit up, and then you would just look both ways to feel the relaxed muscles, which just happens after you do it. And you would generally, by the time you're done that, be much more calm. And you can do it longer.
Right.
Yeah. That's it. You're welcome.
That's beautiful. I am so grateful. And it's like Marcus said, and Chantal is showing, and Marcus too, it's like we all have so much value to contribute. But there's this whole power struggle that we encounter as a people, where it's just like, well, like you guys are co-hosting it, so like when do I say something? I'm just a participant. Maybe those are some of the stories that come up for people, or somebody that's listening. It's like, well, I'm just here to receive what is shared. But it's really just a reminder, at least in this space, where these summits are a chance for us all to be able to say, hey, I just learned something that really worked well for me. And this tool is something that I feel somebody else could benefit from too. And so I'm going to share it. Or I had an experience while you were sharing an aspect of the teaching that you went into that brought me here to this place of experiencing an uncomfortable emotion arising, that then suddenly I was facing my inner child and I wasn't quite sure what to do. And so having conversations like that is really what these meetings are made for. That is part of the intention, to not only give you the tools, it's as much as it may be a platform where it's easy to put somebody on a pedestal. It's easy to put somebody into the guru category if they're constantly adding the value. But there is a big shift that is happening right now as we leave, or as we left the age of the Piscean age and moved into the age of Aquarius. The Piscean age was all about hierarchy and power structures, where the one at the top benefited from the efforts of all the ones underneath. But the age of Aquarius, if we think of it like water, water is level. Water has waves. Water is flowing. Water is fluid. Water is the representation for energy. And so instead of positioning anyone just because we may be speaking more during these, only because we are showing up and want to make sure that you receive value from the time investment, because ultimately you deserve to, because you had a gazillion other things that you could have chose to do with your time, and you chose to be here, and we honor that, we appreciate that, and we want you to understand how much value you have. The fact that the power in this summit is not just because of what is said, but it is because of what is felt. And as I said earlier about being lighthouses, us, each of us, spaced around the world as we are, each of us are doing our part to shine light in that darkness. And so the feeling that you bring to this conference, it is very powerful, palatable, and it contributes to the overall impact of what is experienced by the people that listen back to it. So I think you understand that, but I really want everyone to feel that and to have that acknowledged, and to also say that the guru is not what we're aiming for here, even though Tim's brand is the grumpy guru. But but that aside, keeping your branding, but it's not about positioning anyone as better than or more than or smarter than or gooder than, which isn't a word, but in the context of not good enough being one of the universal stories that ultimately all stories are based off of. It's very important, I feel, for each of our inner child, the inner children within, to understand the power that each of us bring to these meeting spaces. So thank you to each of you for showing up fully tonight. Thank you for taking this time to be here with us and to take from this what you did, and for being willing to contribute. Did you have something you wanted to say?
I would like to ask you, first of all, I'm grateful for the opportunity I have to join you guys here, and I'm just wondering for any of us here or other people, you know, watching us on Facebook, if they want to go deeper into these concepts and they want to learn more, is there any source they can go to you know, get more knowledge on this aspects, like any books or like websites or any other sources you would recommend for this?
Oh man, where to start? I would say Sacred Contracts. Truly, this is a phenomenal resource because she goes into not only the 4 survival archetypes, but she actually branches off and says there are 8 archetypes that are personal to each of us that make up who we see ourselves to be and show up as in this world. And those are really the gifts that we bring. So Sacred Contracts and Carolyn Mace's work she's been a huge influence in my understanding of so much, because this Sacred Contracts, The Anatomy of the Spirit is another of her books that I highly recommend, The Anatomy of the Spirit. And then she also has some programs about the anatomy of the energy system and understanding chakras. And so bringing more of that out. And so I'll be teaching more about this over this next month, in fact, because I do feel like it's time to really offer our people this tools that are going to help with the resilience. And so that's part of what I'm offering. And then that's part of the 66 Days to Transform Your Self-Image series, where I'm going to be taking the best that I've come across and then putting it into something practical so we can go deeper. And essentially the book that I was working on for all of this time is going to be laid out as a coaching guide for us to be able to coach ourselves, which you can't coach yourself as effectively as if you do have a coach, because you can only read a question and go so deep as what your own level of awareness will take you, because you can't see the forest through the trees, or that you can't see the trees through the forest. It's like you can know that they're there maybe, but you wouldn't necessarily appreciate that one particular tree when you're looking at it and you're in the forest. And if you step out, then it's like, oh, I noticed that particular tree, whereas in it, that tree blends into the forest. So that's part of what I'm working on as I kind of money has not been my driving factor at all, as I've shared many times, and it's just like it matters. But from my perspective, building the people is the investment that why we're doing what we're doing in these summits. And then Tim, I know you are working on a lot of different projects, and so you've got workshops and programs and things as well.
Yeah, right now I'm working on that. We've got a few workshops coming out which go on practical applications of emotion work, breath work, inner child work, how to go in step by step, more detailed. We also, I'm working with Gina Lee on developing a 6-month training program so that it goes over quite a long amount of time, so that you have a weekly session, but then you have time to integrate it. I think integration is really vital. And that combines transpersonal psychology, NLP, hypnosis, visualization, and breath work. I can't reemphasize how important breath work is to people.
That actually changed a lot for me. I did Wim Hof's, I downloaded his app and started doing it. I think I did it for 50 days straight. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. So that is another reset for me, that one too. I love that.
And Marissa Peer is the hypnotherapy program that you are studying with, Chantal. That Marissa Peer is a really fantastic guide as well that I've referenced, and her thing is all about I am enough.
Mm-hmm.
And really going underneath of that. So she'd be somebody that could be recommended as well. Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, has always been a foundational text for me. And so I want to actually do a little reading of that book to be able to dig into the principles of be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions, don't take anything personally, and always do your best. Those four agreements truly can transform everything when we realize that sin is simply speaking against ourselves or anyone else. And if we relate that to everything we've been doing tonight, understanding we're nearly to the 2-hour mark, and that's a long time for anyone to sit. So I really want to honor everybody that is here. And if anyone has any suggestions as well that have been profound in terms of your growth and development, Tim, do you have any references that you feel people could benefit from checking out as well?
You know, it's interesting because I've done so much work, and over the past 40 years, the breath work that I developed, honestly, it took me years to produce a series of breathwork meditations and music, specifically the music. The one is Bliss Breath. The other is Kali Chaya Breath, which have a combination of isochronic, solfeggio tones, binaurals. It's also Bliss Breath, for example, is made with trance, with club music. It's not the floaty music, because when I was working with how neuroscience with beat works, I discovered that it actually trance and club music has a way of actually popping the brain right back into, and it helps with your breath as well. So those are some. When it comes to other books to read, holy cow, yay, where do I point on my bookshelf? You know, one great teacher is out of Vancouver, Tirtha. Phil Misselberger has written a number of books which are truly amazing. But it is, I think, some of the problems with that I found out with a lot of the books that were written within the before about 10 years ago, is a lot of those books were devised in ways in which we can simply live with our pain, live with our core wounds. And it wasn't, it was only, we're talking 2005, so 15 years since materials started being changed so that we can actually work through the mistaken beliefs, and understanding how neuroscience has now changed that our emotions, where they come from, how to work through them, how to connect with that part. Because before, there really wasn't a way. And so now I think things are shifting, and, you know, both Laura and I have also been discussing the concept of doing courses online as well.
Yeah, so we need to actually put something together to take people on a deeper dive. And we also just needed to start somewhere, and to start gathering people and to get feedback as to what's useful, what is a gap, what is not useful, or, you know, what could be shared in a different way, what's actually working. These are things that we really need real-time feedback from in order to put together the best thing that's going to support you in going deeper into yourself. So obviously all the work that we do on ourselves, you know, we're still putting things together, and it's not necessarily perfect, but it's the best that we can do. And I feel like for me and how harshly I have judged myself over the years, see how the light changes, it truly, I have taken myself out at the knees, and my saboteur has truly been the guardian of choice. And last year there was a time when I chose to allow the defeated me to sit on the throne of my inner kingdom. And I'm grateful for her to have been willing to be hated so much by me in my own devastation, because there's a daily calendar my mom had given me a couple years ago, and in it each of the days had a different little memo. And the one message that is on my desk is the fact enlightenment is the ego's greatest disappointment.
That's interesting.
Not
I really like that.
right?
It's really very interesting to be able to, all of us as we're going through this journey, to be able to share our own experiences, what worked and even what didn't work. Because just there might be moments when things are not going the way we think they would. And yeah, if I can suggest, one of the books I liked a lot, it's The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I'm really into mindfulness, and I think it just gives a very fresh perspective. Even if the book was written probably like 10 years ago, I think it's still actual, and it can help a lot, especially when it comes to anxiety, stress, depression, unhappiness in general. I think everybody's trying to get to the best version of themselves. And I think you guys are doing a great job. So I don't know what to say. Just I really liked what was discussed, and I really wanted to say something about Tim's background. I really like that. It just it looks so cool. So I just had to take a moment to acknowledge that and tell you that. I don't know where you got that from, but it looks really awesome. I wish I have something similar here in the back, not just my office.
I'm in my bed.
Yeah, my background, I picked that up in Playa del Carmen in Mexico. Yeah,
I love it.
It's yeah.
And I also like Joy's background too. Laura, sorry, you're just like a joy, and it says joy in the back there, and you also reflecting joy. So that just kind of, I like that. I really like that.
Amazing. Oh, I'm so grateful for each of you for showing up tonight and for being present. I can't say enough. I appreciate you for not only being here, but being alive, for choosing to not give up on your darkest days, for choosing to use remaining strength sometimes to uplift somebody that is even lower than you are, and that you saved them from actually taking themselves out of this race. I really am grateful, and I feel emotional with that, because I don't know if everybody is fully appreciative of how significant we all are together. And it's ridiculous that I'm crying right now, but I'm just I'm feeling.
You said have compassion.
There you go. No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. You just whatever comes, you have to honor it, right? That's who you are. It's totally fine. It's totally fine.
And I'm an emotional person, because it's I very much fly high like a hummingbird, which is what my brand did, and it came from if you've seen the hummingbird, you've seen the tattoo. It's just I've got love on my tattoo instead of ljeh.ca and the brand. But the point is it's I am like a hummingbird, and I do feel emotions intensely, and I do let them out. And as much as I say it's ridiculous that I'm having this experience per se in the moment from a logical perspective, I let it happen, and I don't try to stop it, and I don't try to suppress it, because I do my best to honor what shows up, acknowledging that it may seem out of place, But at the same time, it comes up because I mean it in my heart of hearts in such a deep way that it's like, you're so fucking significant in this race. I want you to own that fully. I want you to understand you're not just showing up here in this to get what you need. You're showing up here because what's coming is
it's amazing.
the battlefield.
Yes, it's so authentic. Like I really feel very authentic and genuine, and I think it's great that I think it's a blessing for people to be able to openly share feelings without having any drawbacks and without trying to suppress them. I think it's a really blessing in disguise, I would say, because in a way you would think, oh, what would people would think about me? But on the other way, you're actually expressing the way you feel, and you're very authentic in the moment. You live in the moment. You're definitely in the moment right now. And that feels great. I mean, it might not feel great right now, but afterwards, if you think about it, it's amazing to be able to express yourself, because in this world sometimes you just cannot be like this because of different situations. People might judge you, it might not be inappropriate or things like that. But in this circle, I feel like it's totally acceptable. So thank you for being open.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it's actually, when Tim was speaking, and it struck me about the need to recognize that socially, culturally, gender-wise, we have been conditioned to make men the knights in shining armor that use their emotions underneath of the armor to suppress and contain themselves and keep themselves safely contained and constrained and not expressive of their emotions. And then even figuratively, the damsel in distress that's locked in the tower that he and only he can come and save, she is his heart by Carolyn Mace's teachings. So the damsel in distress, the victim, is the heart of the savior archetype who actually needs something outside of himself in order to have purpose, because he hasn't went inside. He hasn't been willing to feel those emotions. Those emotions don't feel safe, so he needs to have the emotion outside to go find. And so really what this process is about honoring the fact that the knight in shining armor only has a role if he has someone to save. But what we can do is become the hero that doesn't need to save anyone, but simply embodies what it means to have been there for ourselves, to become the safe one who can help in those moments. And then that becomes when we merge and marry. And then we can call ourselves back into the moment and actually pay attention to what's going on in here and recognize when we do that, then we find the queen or the king that doesn't need to be saved, because no longer are we coming at them from the place of a victim or a child or a prostitute or a saboteur in our scared side, but instead we've embraced the sacred aspect of letting emotion show up when it does, because we mean it every moment and every ounce of it. So truly, these are the last moments, guys. So the gap. Anybody have any final words you would like to? Actually, what we'll do is, just because there's only 6 of us on this call, what I would love is to go around and have everyone just say one emotion that you are feeling fully in this moment.
I would go first. I'm very grateful. Just one emotion, gratefulness. That's what I feel. Okay, go on, Jess. Are you happy?
I heard what she said. The shirt?
What does the shirt says?
Warrior?
Warrior?
Does it say warrior?
No.
Can we see it?
No. I mean, your shirt, not mine. Your shirt.
Okay.
I mean, your shirt, not mine.
You need. I'm pulling structure, but I don't think that's what it is.
Can you type a comment?
Yeah, can you put it in the chat?
I don't know what your shirt says. And the rainbow.
Oh, the rainbow.
Oh, the rainbow. He likes your rainbow.
It's what my shirt says. We're all in this together.
Finally.
Ah, you got it.
Sorry, Jesse.
Nice goes to Laura.
Jesse is a character. Amazing. Thank you. Yes. We are all
Another meeting. It was terrible.
sorry, we did our best.
It's good. It's good. You got it.
Finally. I'm over. I'm done.
He's done.
All right, Yvonne.
Come over me. I'm done. I'm done. Mic drop.
You have done your job.
Okay.
No.
Found it. There we go.
No. Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Oh, mic drop. Oh, well done. Yvonne?
Okay, joy.
Nice. Chantal?
I was just going to say grateful as well. Very grateful.
And one word for me. One word.
No more words. It was
No
just
more.
supposed to be one, Jesse.
No more. No more. No more. I'm finished.
Tim?
And for me, just really honored to be here and grateful for having the chance to share this. Thanks, Lord.
I am a lot of things right now in this moment, but I'm going to say excitement. I am feeling very excited by the fact we have 6 amazing human beings on this call tonight, and that each time we come together, we continue to grow in strength because we are doing the inner work. And even though it's a very lonely journey on the way to the mountaintop of ascension, which ultimately when we're on that path and we think it's the top, we get there and then we find it was just the first peak on a higher mountain that continually moves up. And it's very lonely the higher we go, because not as many people are as committed to actually going the whole way as what maybe we are. And so it's a lonely journey, and I'm grateful to not be feeling lonely any longer, because we who are putting in the work are connecting, and that's what the intention for these meetings is. And so I'm thrilled. We'll come together again on the Tuesday, the third Tuesday of December, which is the 15th of December. We'll come together again, 7 till 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tim may be traveling, so he may be in Mexico, maybe en route to Mexico, maybe in British Columbia. So we'll have to see where Tim is at in the world as to whether he will be able to help co-host. But hopefully you who have watched and been part of all of this tonight are able to come again and bring some friends and ultimately continue being the light bearer who is holding your ground. And please understand that we really are in this together. And so I am grateful very much and excited.
Thank you for organizing this.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We are 2 minutes over a 2-hour call, like huge pat on each of our backs. That's a long time to be sat and having high level conversations. So I hope, you know, if you want to have a little drink of water just to nourish yourself as a celebration, then cheers to each of us. And if you've got your water, then we can cheers together, and this will be the end.
And the best is yet to come.
Oh, indeed. Absolutely. Cheers to
I
us.
agree with that.
And have a phenomenal night, everyone. Thank you again for being who you are and how hard you had to work to peel off as many layers as what you did. Congrats.
Okay.
Toodaloo, guys.
Bye.
Thank you again. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Okay, bye.
Bye.